Hey everybody, it is Hayden and I am making Mother's Day dinner, and we're in quarantine and we're locked down, so I've got to use what I've got in the house. So we got some good lamb chops, so I'm going to be making a braised lamb chop as the main protein, and I've got a couple of tricks up my sleeve, so stay tuned. Well, I'm going to start off. As you see, there is no lamb here right now, but I'm going to start in a mirepoix to add as the base for the lamb chop. So I've got onions, I've got what little baby carrots I have left coming from, we've got very little stuff left in the house, so let me find my good chopping knife. Trusty dusty chopping knife. So I'm going to use these little baby carrots, and normally I would have some nice really good whole carrots, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And so I love to cook, as you know, and especially for the family. And Mother's Day, there are 3 moms in the family. There is my wife, there is my mom, and then there is my mother-in-law. And I can hear somebody sneaking around in the background. If you want to come by, just come on by and say hello. It's the little one. Say hello, Hayden.
Hello.
Hayden is my sous chef every now and again, but every now and again, more often than not, she quits me, as most of you parents will know from little kids. Anyway, so I'm cutting up my carrots, and I want to get really nice, even cuts, but you know.
I gotta go brush my teeth.
She's got to go brush her teeth. I'm not going to mention the fact that it is almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Mother's Day means kids' day off too, apparently. So these are little baby carrots. So I'm not going to really get as good of a cut on these as I would like. They are not my desired or preferred carrot of choice. Here is the other green girl. Come on in, say hello.
Hi. This light is bright.
Yes, the light is bright because we want to see everything. Alright, so those are my carrots, and now I'm going to peel my onion, and we're going to get those in.
Don't cry.
I will try not to cry. Clark has never been my sous chef. I think she's allergic to the kitchen. She says yes, she has. Okay. So I've got that going on here, and cut off the top. It's been really hard to get good ingredients. Because during the lockdown, we're trying not to actually go out to the store. So either we are relying on Uber, what he's got, the people who do deliveries and stuff like that. And when somebody's getting food for you, sometimes they're not going to be as picky about their food as you are. So that's been one of the biggest challenges with being on lockdown. If you have ever peeled an onion and you want to get those nice chunks, a really good technique is leave the back end on. That'll serve as like an anchor for your cuts, right? And yes, I have a sticker on me because my daughter gave me a sticker. Even though it was my box of Cracker Jacks, she gave me a sticker. So you want to have cuts that go right across like that on the onion, and then you want to do side cuts like this right down to that little stem there, the root stem. And therefore, when you come back and you cut like this, and you make these cuts, the back end of the stem over there is holding the onion together. If you make even cuts going across, you get yourself a nice minced onion. Right? Some really good pieces right there. Alright, dump that half in there, and then we'll get started on the other half of the onion. One of the interesting things about being on lockdown is being able to try out new recipes. The little one has really tried to expand her palate. She tries new things, and so I've been able to throw a couple of things at her. But the other interesting piece is trying to come up with new recipes for stuff that you already have in the house. So when you can't go out and to your favorite grocery store to get your stuff, sometimes you gotta make do with what you got, and that's not always the best ingredients. I've had to try to figure out some really inventive ways to use frozen vegetables. That's always been interesting. And so, but we're having fun with it, and that's what the main thing is. It's great. It's really being able to have fun in the kitchen, and have some really good experiences that you'll be able to look back on. Celery is starting to wilt. Here's another funny thing. We bought celery because Hayden, the little one, said that she loves celery. Guess who has not eaten very much celery in this entire time? That's it, you got it, Hayden. As you also saw, I left the ends whole so that it provides an anchor for the cuts. So now the cuts, you can go ahead and cut really far down, and they'll stay together, so you don't have to worry about realigning the celery pieces. All right, see, and so we got ourselves nice good celery chop there, and we'll put that in the bowl as well. All right, so it's all chopped up, and so the mirepoix is gonna serve as a good base for the lamb, and so we're gonna start that off. And I've got carrots, celery, and onions in here. We'll be needing some chicken broth and some rum. Well, sorry, bourbon this time. Normally I would use a rum for this, but the bourbon is going to give that woodsy feeling, that earthy feeling that the lamb really needs. So next step, to the fire. All right, so we've got our pan here, and we're going to just give that a medium heat. We're going to oil up the pan. Get the oil nice and hot. So what we're trying to do is, as you saw when I did the Bon Appetit show, is that we're trying to get the vegetables not to get a color on them, just to leave a little bit of a crunch to it. We want to pull out the flavors as much as we possibly can. I don't have any fresh herbs. I am going to be adding a little bit of basil, just again to give that earthy flavor to the mirepoix. All right, let me get a spoon. Sorry for crossing. All right. Got a piece of onion in there that's a little bit larger than I would like. So as you can see from the pan, the pieces are pretty similar in size, and what you want to make sure is that they are as close in size as possible, because they will cook evenly that way. Got a couple of big pieces in there, unfortunately. so I'm gonna let that get up to heat. I'm gonna let that simmer a little bit. The really interesting, so one of the funny things that we were talking about is that a lot of people are baking in this shutdown. Oh, that already smells good. A lot of people are baking in this shutdown, and like I enjoy baking food, like baked chicken or you know, roasting things in the oven. I enjoy putting stuff in the oven when it's savory. But like baking bread and stuff like that has not been my forte. And part of it is because baking is such an exact science, right? So you can't add stuff to it, you can't take stuff away from it. It is what it is, and that's the only adjustment you can make. Once you get it in that oven, that's it, right? But like for instance, if I that's pretty good. All right, and so I'm going to use garlic salt. I'm going to give that a pretty good salting because, like I said, this is going to be the base for the lamb. So it's going to pick up a lot. And those vegetables are starting to sweat out. And that's good. Yeah, so if I find that, you know, this dish is getting too salty, I can make a couple of adjustments to it, right? I can add stuff to it, I can take stuff away from it as the dish is making. With baking, if you get it wrong and you get it in the oven, you're done, right? So, not been very much of a baker. So we're gonna let that simmer for just a little bit more. All right. I think it's time to put some of the basil in, and we're going to start to deglaze in a few seconds. All right, I'm going to get a little bit of the basil in there just to give it, and then we'll get a third of a cup of the bourbon, and we will deglaze this pan. Try not to drink on the job. All right. So here goes my bourbon. Take that over and let that burn off. Woo. That's a good fire. And it's starting to come down, and the bourbon will burn off. Don't worry about the heat. Don't worry about the fire, unless you got your fire extinguisher or your fire thing right next to you. And that just gives such a beautiful flavor. All right, and we're done, right? And so now you've got, look at that. That's beautiful. All right, and like I said, if you could smell it right now, really, really good flavor. And then we're just gonna add a little bit of chicken stock. I'm not going to do much because, like I said, this is going to be the bottom of the pan, so this is all going to sweat itself out. And I'm really happy with this. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit just to get that boil back on because my stock was in the refrigerator, so it's really cold. I'm going to let that really absorb some of the liquid. Now this is a little bit more watery than you would normally use for a mirepoix because, well, for me at least, I want this to be the base, and this is going to sit with the lamb for about 3 hours, right? So I don't want it to be too dry, and I don't want it to stick to the bottom of the pan. I want to give a little bit of a base of liquid so that the lamb, when it generates its own liquid, it'll mix with this liquid, and at the bottom we'll have a good stock, and we can pull that out and make a little bit of a gravy for the lamb. And I think I'm done here, right? Yep. I can smell the bourbon. think we're ready to go. So I'm gonna take that off the heat. So the meal poire is done, and I'm gonna clean up, and then we're gonna get started on working on the lamb. Okay, and we're back. So I got my lamb out of the refrigerator. My lamb has been marinating in some herbs and spices and stuff like that. I like to keep it nice and earthy, with a little bit of a almost kind of like an Indian flavor to it. So while I'm talking, I'm gonna get my pan nice and hot. What we're gonna do, oh, and one of the spices that I like to put on lamb, because it cuts a lot of the I guess the gaminess of lamb, and it's like almost a secret, well, not a secret, but not very well known, cinnamon. So I put a dash of cinnamon, and it just turns the whole flavor profile on its ear. And if you've ever had lamb at the house and you were wondering, it's like, oh, what does that taste? It's cinnamon. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sear my lamb for about 2 to 3 minutes. Sorry, 1 to 2 minutes on each side before we put it in the pan. So cross it in front of camera again. We don't have a producer, so like it's just me. So I'm gonna get some good pieces here. One of the things that I prefer to do with lamb is roast it, but today I'm gonna go for I'm gonna go with my slow roast, my braised. All right, we're gonna do a couple of pieces at a time. So we'll set a timer, 2-minute timer on those. We'll do 6 pieces. I'm expecting 4 adults. And one very hungry 7-year-old who will probably eat 3 pieces by herself. Right up until the time you tell her that it's a sheep that she's eating. I'm gonna have leftover pieces, so I'm probably going to put those on the grill when we get a nice day outside. I find that I'm grilling a lot more these days. Primarily because grill takes a while to set up. You gotta pull it out, you gotta clean it down, and clean it up. But you know, now that you're home, now that I'm home at least, we have more time for that setup, more time to get things done. So I'm finding that I'm grilling a little bit more. I actually find that I am experimenting more with flour things. So I've made naan, we attempted some roti, we've done some biscuits. I'll be doing dumplings sometimes during the week. So normally when you come home from work, the last thing you want to do is sit there and knead dough and roll things out and stuff like that. But if work is done at 5 o'clock and dinner is at 6, you know, I'm right here, right? So I can do all of the prep a little bit earlier. I don't have to worry about traffic. I don't have to worry about a commute that's really going to get me down, and then I get home. So I've been able to dabble in a couple of those things. All right, so that's about, oh, look at that. That's about 2 minutes on that side. And then I'll give it another 1 minute on this side. And this is just to give it a nice color, right? You see it's getting a nice little brown color right there. Now this would have been actually a good place where if I had a griddle, and I do have a griddle, it's just a cast iron griddle and it's a pain in the butt to pull out right now. But this would have been a good place to have like griddle marks on it if you're into that kind of thing, just for presentation. But for right now, what I just want to do is get a nice color on the back side of it, so that when it cooks through, and this is going to fall off of the bone, this is going to be so delicious, right? So you want to give that a little bit of a sear. All right, and so that's almost done. See all of that fat back in there? That's going to turn into one really good base for a gravy. Yes, I know, you're done. All right, so I'm going to sear off three other pieces, and then we'll get them in the oven. All right, so we've seared off all. I actually seared 8 pieces, because I feel like in addition to Hayden eating a bunch, I think I might have more than one. So here's my braising pan, and got my mirepoix, and I'm just gonna lay this at the bottom of the pan. And what that's gonna do for me is literally and figuratively lay the foundation for all of the lamb that I'm going to be putting on top of here. So this is probably going to disintegrate into nothing, right? But all of that flavor is going to go into the lamb chops when we get them in here. So I'm going to lay these in here. And this is going to go into the oven. Now I've preheated my oven for 300, not 100, not 200, but 300. So if you can see that, that's all laid nicely in there, right? And for good measure, because I'm a fat kid, I'm going to get a couple of dabs of butter that's going to sit in the bottom there and add to the richness. It'll also make sure that I don't have a burnt pan later on. But I like butter. If you like butter like I like butter, use any excuse to put butter on something. I'm gonna cover this up in foil. Oh, man down. Alright, so that's in foil, and that's going to go in my oven for 3 hours at 300 degrees. So we'll check back in on that in about 3 hours. In the meantime, got a new dish that I'm trying out. Hopefully this will turn out really well, and we'll come back to that as soon as I get this in the oven. Okay, we're back, and I was actually cooking, and then my daughter looked at me and was like, "Daddy, where's your apron?" So I gotta go get my apron. So remember I told you that we've been playing with a lot of flour, so there's a lot of flour on the apron. Sign of a real cook, I suppose, right? So I wish I could tell you how good, I wish you could smell how good it smells in here. I'll actually do it in here. We are getting ready to make the second dish for the night. It's one of my favorite dishes, and for those of you who don't cook very often, this is a really easy dish. It's a hash, but we are going to be using a lot of color in this hash. So I've got some russet potatoes here, and I'm just going to peel them up, and then we're going to cut those into really small pieces. And the great thing about this hash is that, like I said, it doesn't take a lot of preparation, it doesn't take a lot of skill. You just gotta pay attention to it. Just keep it moving, keep the hash moving. Alright, so that's one. I've got 6 people that I'm feeding, so about 5 of these potatoes should do well. Remember, it's just a side. This is not like a whole meal for somebody. So 5 should cover it, and we probably have some left over, unless it's really good, and then people will want extras. You'll know if you know how good your dish is when your plate is either full, or the plates are either full, or if people are coming back for seconds and thirds. I've had some dishes where people have just been like, "Hey, you want a second round of that?" And they're like, "No, I'm good." That's the worst right there. It's like, oh my God, where did I mess up on that one? Okay, that's 2. I don't know if any of you have favorite utensils. Like, this is my favorite peeler. My wife hates it for some reason. I don't know, maybe the handle doesn't sit well with her, but I love it. I have another one that goes over your finger, and it feels like you're just slicing with your hand. You know, like you're. I like this one. Something very serene about it, or maybe it reminds me of my grandmother when I used to have to peel potatoes with my grandmother in the day. Which is really interesting because, you know, you learn to cook from certain people, but a lot of times you don't even realize that you're learning to cook. Most of the times you're given some sort of duty in the kitchen, right? So go peel those potatoes, or go wash those yams, or go cut up those carrots, or something along those lines. And then the next time that you're in the kitchen, it's a different duty. And so it's almost kind of like you're practicing to be a sous chef. And before long, Big Mama or Grandma or your mom is like, put that rice on the boil for me. And next thing you know, you've cooked something, and it's like, oh my God. And at the meal, everybody's like, oh, that rice was great. I want to have that rice again. And then you get to be like, oh, that was my rice. Hey, Gigi.
Hello. Ooh. Oh, are you recording now?
I am recording. Come on through, Gigi. This is Gigi. Say hi.
Hi.
She's gone. And here is my onion. Just gonna do a quick peel on the onion. I'm just letting everybody roll through because this is a family meal, right? So that's what happens when you cook a meal. There's a whole bunch of people who roll through, and they have a whole bunch of conversations in the kitchen or about the kitchen. Hi, Clark.
Hi.
You want to come through and you want to say hello, or what's happening with you?
I'm trying to find a pen.
You're trying to find a what?
A pen.
A pen. All right. If I could tell you how many pens there are in this house that she's trying to find one, that'd be hilarious. How about by where all the pens are, hey, Clark?
Where are the pens?
By the desk, over there.
What desk?
Where everybody's been working since we've been quarantined for the last 100 years.
Every day is a day.
Every day is a day. All right, so I'm gonna get to cutting up these potatoes, and then we're gonna cut up the sweet bell peppers. And so what I want is I want this to be really, really colorful. So the potatoes and the peppers are gonna provide the brown, but I want there to be a little bit of color, so the bell peppers are going to provide the colors. So I'm trying to get the pieces of the potatoes to be a medium dice. So we want most of them to look like that, right? So that's the goal. So take your time and cut them up. And again, like I mentioned with the lamb and the onions, if they're the same size, they will cook evenly. But if you have pieces that look like this and pieces that look like this, right, you're gonna have an uneven cook. And you don't want that, because that would mean that you have some pieces that are raw, some pieces that are really, really cooked through, and then some pieces that are just complete mush, right? So you want to make sure that you get pieces that are really, really close to each other. I was watching a cooking show and somebody said you want the pieces to look like brothers, not cousins. Which is really interesting way of putting it, since I know a bunch of brothers who you're like, y'all have the same parents? Alright. Oh my God. I'm talking to you and literally this lamb is driving me crazy. Oh, it is so flavorful. And so one of the things about the lamb that I wanted to mention is that the lamb is really marinated, right? And so I'm from the Caribbean, and we tend to not cook anything straight out the box, right? So you see a lot of cooking shows that do this, and it's always a point of contention in the house, or if I'm watching with my parent or like old school Trinity people, and it's like, wait, they gonna just take it out the pack and cook it just so, right? So we tend to marinate and season everything for days. Like if you go into any Caribbean person's home, I guarantee you, if you look in the freezer, there is some sort of meat that when they first got it, it was seasoned up, and then they put it in a bag or put it in some container, and it's been sitting there for days. And if it's in the freezer, probably a good couple of weeks or something like that, waiting for the day that it gets to be cooked. Because we love seasoning, and we want that seasoning to be really present and all the way through in all of the stuff that we cook, right? So you'll see, you'll go in the freezer. I dare you right now, find a Caribbean friend and call them up and say, hey, you got any meat in your freezer or in your refrigerator, just like seasoning, just marinating? And it's like, what do you mean? It's gonna be like, and the question is gonna be like, what do you mean? You don't, right? So it's just really part of the process. You don't cook, we tend to not cook our meat right away without letting the seasoning seep in for like a day sometimes, right? And you know, so a lot of times when you're on these cooking shows, there isn't an opportunity to have something steeping in seasoning for that long, so you don't see that. But that's not the Caribbean way. The Caribbean way is to let it soak for a while and then have that flavoring go all the way through your stuff, right? So when Thanksgiving comes around, my turkey is in brine for a good couple of days, right? So just to get that kind of flavoring all the way through, and then even with that, we'll pull it out of the brine maybe the night before, and then add some seasoning underneath the skin. And even with that's an overnight thing, right? So we just want it to be flavorful. And if you've ever had Caribbean food, one of the things about it is that it is very, very flavorful. It is very, and there is no end to the flavor. It's like you take a bite and then you take another bite, and it's deeper and deeper, and it's all the way to the bone. It's probably why the reason that you see a lot of Caribbean people just biting on the bone or chewing on the bone. My grandmother would eat the bone all the way through. Like, she loved marrow. And it was funny because as I got older, I started to see restaurants that were offering marrow soup or cooked roasted marrow and stuff like that. And I was like, that ain't nothing but, biting through the bone, right? So it's always interesting how the rustic the rustic recipes and the rustic ways of eating oftentimes become fine dining in different places. All right, so I'm about finished with my potatoes. I think that these are good pieces. We'll give that a quick wash. Now I tend to cut the potatoes up right as these couple pieces want to escape into the world. Right as we're getting ready to use them, because you don't want the potatoes to get discolored. But there's a trick to doing it if you want to cut it up ahead of time, and like you have them soaked in cold water, I believe is what it is, and that cuts down on that's what cuts down on the discoloration of the potatoes. But if you're cutting them up right before you get them into the pots, you should be fine. Now I'm going to cut these a little bit bigger than I did for the last thing that we did, the mirepoix, because I want the pieces to really stand out, right? So I want to actually see the pieces of the onion. There we go. All right, so it's going to be a little bit bigger of a dice, so you can see that there. But it's the same technique. Cut all the way down to the back stem. Don't cut the back stem off, and then cut straight through. One of the great things about cooking is that when you go to bed sometimes, as somebody who cooks, when you go to bed sometimes, and these have already been washed, so I'm just going to cut straight through these, and these are going to be a pretty large dice as well. Alright, so that's my red bell pepper. I'm going to give this a pretty large dice so that we want that to have a little bit of a texture in the final dish, but we also want that to have a good size to give it the color. So you don't want it to lose, you don't want it to disappear into the dish, you want to see it. Alright, so that's a pretty large dice, so you see that right there. Yeah, but the great thing about cooking is that if you're a cook and you know you have a big meal coming up, or even if you have just regular Sunday dinner or your dinner every evening, you start to think about, oh, okay, here's what I'm going to cook and here's how it's going to taste. And the great thing about cooking is that thinking up and coming up with some sort of dish and flavor profile, and you can taste it in your head, and it's like, oh, this is exactly what this is going to taste like, and then executing that dish and actually having it come out the exact same way. I think that's probably one of the greatest things about cooking. All right, so we've got brown. Now we've got some red. And now we're going to put a little bit of orange. Or yellow, actually, sorry. I know somebody's yelling at me, yeah, you better use that top. You cut that whole top off and nothing. It's like, look, we got a limited amount of time in this thing here, so I want to make sure we get the cuts. And then we can talk about wasting. All right. So that's one. Here's the other half. All right, so we are almost done here. I don't know if you can hear, my daughter is in the living room playing the piano, and she is practicing my wife's favorite Stevie Wonder song for Mother's Day. Isn't that beautiful? All right, so here's everything all chopped up, right? Even in the bowl, it looks colorful. And we're gonna hit this with salt and pepper, and we're gonna get into the pan. So that's next. All right, and we're back. And we got my nonstick pan here, and we're gonna add a pretty liberal amount of oil. And then we're just gonna dump everything in. That's a lot to go through here. And we just wanna get that mixed in. The one thing that you wanna make sure is that you get a good mix on here, or else you're gonna have potatoes on one side, peppers on another side, and you want it to be all blended together. All right, so I wanted to get the pan hot. Hello, Hayden.
Hello. I'm just here to get my stuffy.
You're here to get your stuffy?
Yep.
Do you want to know what I'm cooking?
You're cooking.
I'm cooking a hash.
What's a hash?
So this is a potato hash. Come on over here. So we've got potatoes, we've got onions, and we've got some bell peppers in different colors, and that's gonna all come together.
So when you ring them, they sound like bells?
I think they came up with the name because they look like bells. All right, here we go. So we're gonna add some salt. This is a lot in here, so we're gonna add some salt. Bye. And some cracked pepper. All right, give that a stir and get that mixed in. And I'm gonna leave this, like this is how simple the dish is, right? So I'm gonna put a cover on this, and then I'm just gonna leave this on the stove and come back to it. And the potatoes and the onions especially are gonna sweat out, and that's gonna give me a little bit of moisture, and that's gonna help the cut. So I'm gonna lower the heat a little bit. Let me get my cover for the pan. And we're just gonna let that cook. This should be done in about 15 to 20 minutes. And what you want to do is you just want to keep on checking on it. You don't want the potatoes to get too mushy, or else you're gonna have a mashed potato dish. But you want to get a nice little sear on the bottom. Then keep it moving so that it gets seared all the way through. All right, so we're gonna come back to this. We just got this started, and the next thing that we're gonna start is on the Brussels sprouts. Yes, I said Brussels sprouts. All right, so for our next dish, we are going to cook Brussels sprouts. Now, I love Brussels sprouts, but not everybody else in the house does. So I'm constantly trying to find a way to get Brussels sprouts into people, or cook it in a way that I like it so that everybody eats it. So I figured this out yesterday, combining a couple of techniques. One that we use for crispy shallots, but another one that I saw somewhere else. So this is going to be fried crispy Brussels sprouts. So this is a mandolin. If you don't have a mandolin, you can take your time and chop up the Brussels sprouts really, really thin. And they need to be really thin because we're going to fry them. And if they are not thin enough, it's going to take too long to fry. So I'm just bringing these down to close to where the stems are. And here comes Clark. Hey, Clark.
Are you trying to sneak Brussels sprouts into what we're eating?
I am not trying to sneak Brussels sprouts into what we're eating. I am putting Brussels sprouts into what we're eating, and hopefully you find it interesting. You don't have to eat it.
Okay.
What's your main problem with Brussels sprouts? What do you not like about Brussels
They
sprouts?
just don't look
Hmm?
good. They just don't look good.
You don't love them?
They just don't look good.
They don't look good. Well, what if they look like this? Like, see how I'm chopping them up now? So it's a look thing for you.
Green shallots.
They look like green shallots. Did you just hear me say shallots? Is that why you're calling them green shallots?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so these are humongous Brussels sprouts. So I've gotten through, how many of these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've already got a full bowl. I think I'm only gonna do one set of these.
Can I go upstairs?
Yeah, sure. So I'm only gonna do one set of these because I got a full bowl, and still never actually tried this out on the family, so I don't know whether they're really gonna like it. All right, so if you have a mandolin and you're using this, please be careful. Use the guard that they sent with the mandolin. I have a nice tiny small one, so I'm kind of accustomed to it. And Brussels sprouts, they kind of have their own little handle, so I feel safe, but I want you to be safe as well. I don't want you to be like, oh, well, I saw Hayden doing this by hand, and I'll do it by hand, and next thing you know, you lose a thumb or some other appendage, so, or some other finger, I should say. Okay, I think that's enough. So we got it nice and shredded, right? So I think maybe I'll go for one more. You know, Diane von Fossenberg used to say, when you get dressed, look in the mirror just before you walk out and take one thing off. I'm kind of the other way when it comes to cooking. It's like, look at how much you've got and then add one more thing to it. All right, so we've got our Brussels sprouts here, and the next thing we'll do, we're gonna take it to the pan, all right? All right, and we're back. And here is the hash. And I actually waited a little bit too long to give that a turn because we got some sticking going on. Those of you who like butter, this would be a good time to add butter to it. This has been going for 5 minutes, and we can already see that some of the potatoes are completely mush, right? So it was getting close to just turning this off. You see me dropping a whole bunch of stuff, right? And I hit this with a little bit more salt. All right, so I'm gonna turn that and cover that back up and turn the heat down, and we'll be back to that. Okay, so I think we're good on the hash, so I'm gonna turn that off. Let's see what that looks like. That looks delicious. So the hash is done. See, really easy. And what I have now is a pan of hot oil. All right, so this is olive oil, but if you wanted to use maybe canola oil or some other oil in order to do this, that's up to you. It's really up to you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to separate out some of these chunks right here, but I'm going to put half of this in here. All right, half of the Brussels sprouts right in the oil, right? And you're going to give a nice, hear that sizzle? And here's the trick. Gotta keep it moving. Gotta keep it moving. And the reason you want to keep it moving is that you don't want to get any burns. You don't want it to burn in any part of the oil. All right? And so this is going to look weird, right? Because this is not the traditional way that you see green things being prepared, but this is going to be so good. And so while you're doing this, before I set this up, I have my draining sheet over here with a paper towel underneath it for when this is ready, because you don't want to stop moving the Brussels sprouts because you want them to coat evenly, you want them to cook evenly, so you can't stop what you're doing to go get more, more stuff in the kitchen. All right, so you want to keep this moving and you want to watch the color. As soon as they start to get a little bit brown, it's time to go. And this is going to happen really, really fast, right? So as soon as you start to see, and that you can't see directly in the pan, but like sometimes at the edge here, you'll see one or two of them start to burn, and you want to guard against that. That's why you got to keep it moving. You want to keep stuff from being on the edges and burning, so that you want to have all of them cooked at the same rate, as opposed to some getting really burned and then some getting just a nice char on it. All right, so we're keeping this moving. And the bubbling that you're hearing is just the moisture in the leaves just escaping. So what you're looking for is when that bubbling starts to stop a little bit. And that's when you'll get a nice good char on it. I'm so hungry. One of the things you should not do is cook when you're hungry. You want to eat everything. Kind of reminds me of when my grandmother used to cook all the time, and she would cook and then not eat with us. My mother does the same thing, right? My mother will cook and then not sit down and eat with us because number one, you're exhausted after cooking all the time, but number two, because you've been picking at all of the food, you almost are not hungry anymore. And so cooking while hungry is always dangerous. Dangerous only in so much that you won't be able to enjoy your food. So this is taking a little bit longer than I thought it would. But it's coming along. You're starting to see some of the leaves starting to wilt. Did this as an experiment yesterday. It went really fast. So you're learning right along with me. This is looking good. It smells really good too. So the eldest one, my eldest daughter, knows that these are Brussels sprouts, but we'll see if we can fool the youngest one into having some. And then it'll be like, surprise, you just ate Brussels sprouts. All right, so I can see them getting a little bit of color, so it's almost time to go. It's almost time to go. And you can see the browns happening at the edges. And it's one of those things where as soon as you blink, you're done, right? All right, I'm almost ready to take this off because I don't want it to burn, but I do want it to stay crispy. It's getting there. You see that brown coming in? Right, and here we go. And it is time. All right, so gonna get these off and get them onto this pan here and spread them out really fast. Get that really spread out really quickly. All right, I'm gonna put that oil back. And so we're gonna spread that out. And so that's gonna get crispy really fast. And as soon as it comes off, I'm gonna hit that with whatever salt you're using. I'm using garlic salt. And you don't wanna get it too salty, but you wanna hit it as soon as you can. And so, now that's topped with salt, and that's done, right? So I'm gonna do this set. I'm going to add a little bit more oil to the pan because that took up a lot of oil. So I'm going to add a little bit more oil to the pan, and then I'm going to do the second set. The second set, I'm going to use honey. So that's going to be sweet, whereas this was savory. So those are a couple of random pieces there. So here's the second set going in. Okay. think this needed a little bit more oil because we want that to swim a little bit, right? So we want to keep it moving. But this will work. All right, I'm gonna let that sit for just a little bit. I'm gonna move the first set into a bowl here. There we go. All right. So how's that look right there? That's your first set. Oh, that's delicious. That's delicious. I make a mess in the kitchen, but it tastes good, so I get excused. I wish I were doing this live because people could ask those questions. But here we go. It's moving about. We're keeping it moving. There's some leftover stuff from the last one, so that'll just make it extra crunchy. Those will be the extra crunchy ones. It looks like I got the majority of stem pieces in this one. That's a good note for when you're doing this. You want to make sure that you evenly spread that out, or else you're going to get one batch. If you're doing more than one batch, that is. You're going to get one batch that has a whole bunch of stems in it, or you're going to get another batch with not a lot of stems in it. You want them to look even. You don't want to have people making choices about that depending on the stems. Just going to get my honey. Have that set up so that's out here ahead of time. And keep it moving. Keep them moving. This is actually overpowering the smell of the lamb, believe it or not. Took a peek at the lamb. It is doing really, really well. So we're doing this again. And keeping that moving. It's going to be a little bit more difficult because I actually have some pieces in here that were from the last one. All right. There we go. It's coming along really nicely. The great thing about this is that because of the quarantine, I'm cooking Mother's Day at home. But normally, we would be going out to a restaurant and having to vie with all of the other mothers that are out there. And there's nothing wrong with that. We've been doing that, you know, in perpetuity. But it's my mother, my mother, my mother-in-law, and my wife. And so it's tough to navigate what everybody eats and what setting is going to be good for everybody. So this has actually been a blessing in disguise where I can control the menu, I can control how people are interacting and what they're getting. And you know, if somebody doesn't eat something, kitchen's right there, right? So I can just jump back in the kitchen and do something quick, or like I said, try to do things ahead of time that I know that everybody will be interested in eating. We're almost there on this second batch. Starting to look really good. There you go. I'm starting to see some dark ones, some new dark ones. The original dark ones are still in there. I'm starting to see some new dark ones. And you want to keep it, you want to make sure that the batches look the same, right? So this batch is getting there. And as you saw with the crispy shallots on the Bon Appetit show, it changes color right in front of you. So you pull it out at one color and it's going to be another color by the time it gets on the pan. And I think that I am about ready to pull these out of the pan. Yep, we're good on this one. See, it's got that brown. So we're going to come over here and pull these out. Spread them out on the pan. Some of these are going to taste like chips, right? Because they are more flat, because we got the stem part in them. There we go. I'm going to spread that out, get the oil off. All right. I'm going to put the pan back. And like I said, you got to get it really fast. And we're going to hit this with honey. Just a sprinkle. So you're going to have the bitterness of the Brussels sprout now with the sweetness of the honey, and that's going to be absolutely amazing. I think this is going to surprise, this batch here is going to surprise people when they get it. Alright, so we spread that out, and it's nice and thin. Alright, let's see what we got here. That's great. That's amazing. So we're going to leave that and let that dry out, and we're all good. All right, so this is the second batch right here. Oh, that's delicious. That's delicious. All right, when we come back, we're gonna get that lamb out of the oven. All right, it's time to get this lamb out of here. Oh my God, that smells so good. All right, I don't know what this looks like, but oh, okay. That's pretty. I don't know if you can see that right there. All right, so I'm gonna pull that over here, and we're going to plate it up.
Hello people, I am back with my cold lamb.
And my daughters don't know. All right, so, oh, look at that. That's just falling off the bone. I can't even get it into the pan. I might have to get a spatula. That's really good. That's really good. All right. So, getting that out the pan. I'm going to let that rest. Dinner is in about 15 minutes, so this is going to rest. And while we're doing that, I am going to scoop what's out of the pan. I'm going to make a gravy with this. All right, so there's a lot of grease, but some of the mirepoix is still in here. All right, so I'm gonna scoop that up and get that into a pan, and then I'm gonna hit that with a processor, add a little bit of flour, and we're gonna have ourselves a good little gravy to go with the lamb. What I wish I had was some mint. I think that would go a little bit, that would go really well with this as well. So I'm spooning this off because I don't want to get all of the oil. There's a little bit of oil in here, but I want to get most of the mirepoix. So we got that going on, right? And we're going to blend that. And the pan goes into the sink. Alright, so here's my food processor. going to give this a quick blend, and then I'm going to add a little bit of thickening agent. And this time the thickening agent will be that's really high. This time the thickening agent will be a little bit of honey. Sorry, not honey, flour. Add a little bit of water to this, but I'm gonna tell you this right now. You might not need a thickening agent for this one, because this bad boy is already pretty thick. So I think we're pretty good on that, and I'm making a mess. So we're done with that. We're done with that. Now put that on a low. We'll add some water to that, and then we'll have ourselves a little bit of a gravy. We'll have that steep up, and we should have a decent gravy. Smells really good. All right, so a little bit more water, and we should be good. And we'll be right back. All right, so everything is done. And so let's see what we have here. Here is the lamb, and that's the gravy that we have to go with the lamb. Here's the hash, all plated out. And these are the fried Brussels sprouts. That's the one in front is the one with honey, and the one in the back is the one with salt. And this is the Mother's Day dinner. Got a couple of biscuits and some fruit, and then that's it, right? So happy Mother's Day, and I hope that this was fun for y'all who were watching. Have a good one. Bye.